Starting the recording.
I'm Brad Chisholm. I'm the owner of Computer Crusher Recycling Company. We're based out of Denton, Texas. About 10 years ago, approximately, I was sitting in my office and I got a phone call, and right away, a couple red flags popped up. It was an individual contacted me, and he started out by saying he was a Craigslist seller. And he said he had some computer equipment that we might be interested in purchasing. And so I quickly dismissed him and just told him I wasn't interested. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, he was really persistent. And he said, let me just get your email address. Let me just send you a link to the listing. It's currently on Craigslist. So finally, kind of to get rid of him, I did give him my email address, and I told him, I said, I'll look at your listing, and then if I'm interested, I'll get back with you, thinking that'd be the last I hear from him. Well, shortly thereafter, he did follow through, send me an email, and it was in fact on Craigslist. I clicked the link, and it was two warehouses. They were two storage units. Large storage units, full, front to back, all the way to the ceiling. As soon as you open, he had just a picture of the doors open, and all I could see were boxes. I couldn't tell what it was. So I just kind of ignored it and went on about my day. Within 5 minutes, he's called me back. He's like, hey man, he's like, I need to get this stuff. I need to get rid of it. I need to get out of the storage unit. I'm paying rent. I told him, I was like, man, I don't even know what this is. I said, it's boxes. Who knows? There might be body parts in there. I don't know. And so he FaceTimed me, and he showed me, he's opened up a couple boxes. There's some PCs. He's like, I don't know. He's like, be honest with you. He said, I know it's all IIT equipment, but I'm not sure what all it is. This went on for a while, and I finally, he said, hey, $500, you can have it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And red flags were popping up all over the place. Finally, he got down to $200. And I thought, we actually run a little bit light. We do need some equipment. So I said, all right, I'll give you $200 for it. So I sent my guys out to go pick it up. And instantly I became very unpopular in my warehouse, as they made a trip down there in a large box truck and filled it up. And the driver came in my office about 4 hours later and said, this is like a 2-day project. He said, we're going to make 2 or 3 trips to get all this back. He said, you won't believe how much stuff it is. So I'd already kind of bought into it, literally. And so they continued that process. Well, as we inventoried this in, we finally got it all into our warehouse. And as still the process today, as we inventory all the equipment that comes in, we touch everything. We look at every box, we pull everything out, we see exactly what we have. And pretty quick, my inventory guy came into my office and said, you might want to come out and take a look at this. So I think you're going to be real interested in it. So my interest was piqued. I went out and took a look, and there were asset tags. He said, there's basically asset tags on all this stuff. And I can't give away the company name, but I will tell you, it was a very large school district. In fact, I Googled it, and the school district is larger than almost any major university. It is huge. And when we see that, I mean, there's so many things that go off in our mind. Number one, that's a customer we would love to have and can hardly ever touch. But it was very strange that we had their equipment in our warehouse. And so they went on about their business, and shortly thereafter, the inventory guy came back to me and said, I found a box of hard drives. And he said, there's computers, there's laptops, there's printers, there's everything, but they still have hard drives in them. So I said, just go through the whole thing, put all the hard drives in one box, and come and bring it and set it in my office. And so he did. I don't know how many days this went on, but finally he came huffing and puffing and pushing that. He had to push it into my office. And so sitting at my desk, these large box of drives. Back then I had a PC that would had a little hard drive reader and would plug in all different types of IDE and SATA back then, back all it was. And so I began plugging them in and looking at these drives. And I was blown away. You absolutely would not believe the amount of information that I had at my fingertips. So just a few drives into this, I found social security numbers for every teacher, for every staff member, for every student. I clicked on a folder, on a directory for an HR folder, and it about locked my machine up. And it finally opened up, and you just would not believe the information of social security numbers. There were student medical records. There was drug sniffing dog results. There was criminal background checks, criminal records. There's disciplinary personnel files for the teachers. There was personal letters from the teachers. This is a couple hard drives into this thing. It would have taken me a decade to go through it all. But I was blown away that this was sitting here and that this came out of Craigslist. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today. Actually, that story did have a good ending. I guess I need to finish part of it. I immediately, it took me a minute or two to think about what's the best way to approach this. And so I had a contact there, and I reached out to them directly and just told them point blank that I had answered a Craigslist ad, and I have some hard drives that I think you would be interested in looking at. And so this was a secretary. She reached out to the IT director. She goes, "Let me talk to him. I'll get right back with you." Well, about as quick as the Craigslist guy called me back, she called me back and said, he wants to have a meeting with you. So I'm kind of looking at my calendar, and it was probably Tuesday or something. I said, "Well, how about Friday at 10 a.m.? She said, "We need to meet with you today. If you can meet this afternoon, please come meet with us. We'll come there. You can come here." So I made an appointment with them that afternoon, walked in, I sat down at a table, and just like that, I'm sitting at a table. Right across from me is the IT director, the secretary sitting next to him, and then there's, I don't know who else is sitting in there with me. And what I did was I didn't bring the drives with me. I printed them out. I printed out, I was kind of sneaky about it. I did print out, I looked up some of the IT people I was going to be meeting with, and I found the list that had their social on there. And so I had a couple of pieces of paper, made copies, passed it out to everyone. And so as I'm sitting there, the secretary is sitting next to the IT director, and she kind of starts snickering, and she nudges him and says, "Your social's on here." And so needless to say, he was not in a very happy mood. He looked at me directly and said, "I want to tell you that before this meeting is over, my only goal is to find out how this equipment got in your hands." And it was like I was under fire here. And I said 2 words: Craigslist. And you should have seen his face. His wheels are turning. I don't know what happened after that. I'll make the long story short and move on. It did have a happy ending. I met with them later, and I returned all of the hard drives. I asked them, "Hey, well, that's what we do. We destroy hard drives." No, they wanted to have them. So I returned everything, all the evidence back to them. Interestingly enough, I've never heard from them since, which is interesting for me. But anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about that today, because I want to talk to you a little bit about what really goes on with IT recycling, and kind of behind the scenes perspective from what I've seen. I'm the owner of Computer Crusher Recycling. I started it myself, me and my father. I'm a UNT alumni, and I got a bachelor's in BCIS, and really didn't study any of this type of thing that I'm doing now until my capstone course. We looked at e-waste issues. And the thought occurred to me, what does a company do if they have 2,000 employees and they do a refresh? What do they do with all the hard drives? And again, this is 14 years ago. So things were a little different then. But I thought there has to be an answer. There has to be a way to do this properly. Well, here we go. Last year, fast forward 2019, we recycled over 422,000 pounds of computer equipment. That's how much equipment came through our door. That's how much that equipment we touched by hand, and we touch every piece of it. But 422,000 pounds. We're a hard drive destruction company, and we process 15,000 hard drives. And as I was kind of running through the report, I thought it was interesting. 19,000 pounds of mice we recycled. Honestly, probably some keyboards involved in that too, but that's a lot of mice and a lot of cables and a lot of stuff that goes through our hands. And kind of the trend, again, I started this back in 2006, 2007. I think I have a picture here. There we go. This was very common in those days. When I first started, this is what we recycled. And I think it's important that you hear a little backstory about this to kind of see where we're at now, because I posted something like this similar the other day on LinkedIn. I think Nick commented on it. But look at those beige beauties. But I can tell you those beige beauties were beasts, and they were heavy. And but this is what we did, and you could look out throughout a warehouse, and everything was white. And as you can see in this picture, there would just be a few black boxes here and there. And there was not really an interest at that time for any type of reuse capacity for this equipment that we were removing from businesses. Nobody wants a P3. I mean, even back then, nobody was really upgrading to a P3, and there wasn't a whole lot of use for reuse. But inside of the computer, every single piece can be recycled. And so we became a teardown facility, and we would tear PCs down piece by piece. You know, a circuit board can be isolated and recycled. It's got precious metals on it. The PC is full of copper, and plastics can even be recycled to make oil and fuel. There's all different types of things that can be done, but the entire thing can be recycled. But that was about it. It was used for scrap. But in fact, I grabbed one of these. I was walking through the warehouse. Some of y'all may know what that is, but I could almost stick my head through it. But it was an old IBM platter out of a hard drive. And I used to have the hard drive sitting on my wall. It's very heavy, but we get really old, still do, really old antique stuff that's really interesting to find. But bottom line is all this stuff would get torn down and recycled. But over the years, as you can see kind of from the picture, more black started showing up in the midst of the white, and more newer type of equipment started coming out. And so the trend started changing a bit. There was a shift in the way of thinking of how to process computer equipment. So we figured there's actually a way that we can begin to reuse equipment rather than just scrapping it. So recycling, as I mentioned, the tearing down of equipment is a great thing to do, and it's better than throwing it in a landfill, but it's not better than reusing it. If you can do it properly, if you can extend the life of it. Now, in our industry, we have the term end of life. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but any of these PCs here, these beige PCs, are all end of life. Not much more that we can do with them. And so they can be torn down. But more and more, as technology has moved over the years so fast, as you guys know, companies just constantly upgrade to keep up. And so now they're doing refreshes on stuff that's not really that old. At least it still has some life in it. And when you can reuse instead of recycle, you're driving down the demand for consumer buying. And so there's so many benefits of it, and extending the life and taking it as far as you can, rather than boosting up manufacturing. Can you imagine if every American went out and bought a PC instead of buying reused equipment and just bought all new? I mean, we wouldn't be able to handle it. But quickly, and I'm going to get in because the title of this is 5 things you need to know before you recycle your IT equipment. And I'm going to get to that. But I'll tell you a few things. And one thing you know for sure before we get into that is security. And that's the thing you run up to at the very beginning of this thing when you think about recycling your IT equipment. And it's why you guys hang on to all your you go every one of you has in your closet, you've got laptops and PCs, and at work it's all stacked up somewhere. It's because hard drives are sitting there and nobody can make a decision on, well, these, what's still on this drive and what's on that drive, and should we keep them, or what's going to happen to them. People are concerned about it. So it is something to be concerned about. If you get rid of it, you're going to have somebody coming in your place removing it. So it's security is definitely number one. I don't have to tell you. I mean, your data, your customers' data is on your drive. Your employees' data, as I found out when I looked at the school district's drives, everybody's data is on there, and so you do have a lot of responsibility with it. The other thing I want to mention quickly, and I'll touch on when I get to my 5 points, is asset tags. When you stamp that PC, and I can see several on these old beige PCs here, the companies where we got them from, and they put their asset tag on, which is a great thing. But once those go out your door, that equipment is identified with you. Hopefully the recycler is going to do the right thing, but if he decides not, if he turns into a Craigslist seller guy, well, guess whose asset tag will be red on it, and it's yours. So there's things to consider that I'm going to bring up. The other thing about it is, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've been told, okay, come get this equipment. All the drives have been pulled. Don't worry, there's no drives in them. We learned a long time ago to never take that for granted. So we go through every machine, and almost every time we can find a drive. Not every single time, but it's difficult for you guys to try to track every piece that comes in and out of your organization and know what happened to it and who just popped into the IT room and threw it in the pile. So we come across those things quite a bit. Well, I'll talk about these things with my 5 points about what you should expect from an e-waste processor. I'll just tell you real quick that you need to find somebody that will take all of your IT equipment and not just cherry pick. And you might have, I know a couple of you guys are in charge of this, and we come across it all the time, and I'll talk more about that later, but there is a problem with recyclers that will come in and won't take all the things you have. They'll just take the nice things and leave you with the rest. Data destruction, when you consider a e-waste processor, will they do it on site for you? That's a need for some industries. It might not be your industry, but we have many customers where we have to crush drives on site. We do it off site for most. It's easier for everybody doing it off site, but we're one of the first companies in the Metroplex who have been able to come on site and crush drives in front of people. We do a big city municipality once a year, and they'll have about 2,000 drives that we'll crush on their parking lot. And there'll be 2 chairs. They wait, thankfully they wait till the weather's nice. They'll call us out, and they'll sit out there all day long and watch every drive being crushed. And just some industries require that. And but that's something you need to kind of find out about your processor. Certificate of destruction. You need documentation to prove what you were doing. You will be audited. Either you probably have a system of internal audits, or healthcare has HIPAA. There's different ways that you track those things, or somebody's watching you track it. But you need to make sure your recycler offers you a certificate saying this is what we did, and documents that through a certificate of destruction, which I'll talk about quickly. Asset tags I talked about. Is very important that those are removed. I suggest, if that's not part of your program, when you retire stuff, that you just get you get an intern or somebody to remove all those asset tags for you, so they're not left on your equipment down the line. I made up this term, and so I don't think it's real. And you guys, as IT guys, will probably know what I'm talking about. But I call it a BIOS stamp. Um, we did a huge job for Home Depot at one point, and we destroyed their hard drives as they wanted, and we got to sit these PCs on a bench to look at them with no drives in them, just booting them up without a drive. And the splash screen from the BIOS said, "Welcome, Home Depot." And so that's something that we had to work with the IT department to find a way to erase that. And they didn't realize that those had gone out the door like that. We found out there was a way to jumper the battery or something that y'all probably know more about and scrub the BIOS to get rid of that. But there's just things that to think about as you're going through it. The vendor should be able to explain their process to you, how it works. This is what we're going to do. And if you have questions, of course, they should be able to answer those. So quickly, I'll run through this.
Well, hang on real quick.
Yeah,
Would it make sense to pause for questions real quick? Anybody have
absolutely.
questions
Please,
on
I
what?
forgot to mention that, but please interrupt me anytime.
I actually wanted to know, Brad, when you destroy drives on site for a customer, do they ever have a mandate where they have to keep the dead destroyed drives for some kind of compliance reason? I really don't know the answer.
I have come across that a few times. Usually not if it's 2,000 drives, they want it gone. But we haven't run into that much. And that's the kind of the beauty of what we do. And I can talk about wiping drives because we do wipe drives for some clients, but where we got our name is from our physical destruction. That's what we've done from the beginning. And when people see that, that's enough. They see it and they understand, okay, it's scrap metal now. And they make the connection, and that's why we've always offered it, so that you can see, and it's not just a promise like, don't worry, we'll take care of it back at the warehouse. Once they see that, they're sold on it, and it needs to be recycled. So, and the metals, need to be recycled as well. But I haven't run across that much. But I've had a few that even after I crushed it, they wanted to take it with them, but not very often.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And kind of as we go through this, think of our business and anybody you deal with. We have two facets of this. When I was kind of even more than that, but the main avenues that we service are data destruction and recycling. So once we destroy 2,000 hard drives, we've taken care of the data security issue. But then you have 2,000 pounds of metal that needs to be recycled responsibly. So there's that part of it too. We're an environmental company as well as security.
Now, when you do those on-sites, is it a shredder or do you use a drill?
It's a machine that runs on an air compressor. We've gone through many different methods over the years. And in fact, we did it by hand for many years. I can't tell you how many drives I've crushed with my right arm. But we have a machine that has a CNC machined head that has spikes in it. And we stick the drive in there, and then it's run over air with a compressor so that we don't have to use the customer's electricity. We're totally self-contained. We can do 3 to 4 per minute, and we just literally go in and crush the platters only. We crush each individual platter and do it that way.
So you disassemble the drives in order to crush the platters, or is it just something that pokes through the top lid?
No, it's a 20-ton capacity machine. And so it puts 20 tons down into these spikes that go down into the platter. So it'll go through anything. It'll go through whatever, even, well, I've never tried to crush something as big as this, but we've got those old IBM huge drives, and it'll go through that housing. The hard drives are made out of, the casing's made out of different materials. Most of it's aircraft aluminum. You would be surprised how difficult it is. I can't tell how many times I've had IT guys, I'll take it out back and take it out to my farm and shoot it or whatever. But, and that would probably do it, I'm sure, but it's not quite as easy as you think. And so we have this press that puts all the tonnage down on these spikes that go through the platters. So the platters are completely pierced all the way. You can see it from the top of the hard drive casing down through the bottom. But no, we don't. When I first started, I actually disassembled them by hand. And as you can imagine, that was a very slow process. But no, now, like I say, we can do 3 to 4 a minute.
Yeah, my only reason for my question was more along recovering the magnets in it, if there's any value in that.
We, I've tried that, and that's funny. I haven't heard that in a long time, but I used to hear it all the time. In fact, there was a guy who would purchase them from us for a while, and you know about those magnets. They are incredible, and we have them. I'm sure I've got them in my office here. We have them all over our warehouse, using them for holding up signs. I can't tell how many different uses we have for holding holders up for our brooms go. I mean, we just use them for everything, and they're extremely strong. But I've never, I tried, it's been a long time since I've looked into it, but we did look for the recovery value of those magnets, and I've never been able to find them. But that was, it's been a while since I've even looked into that. But it's fascinating, the magnets that are in those drives.
I use them to organize my drill bits in my drill case.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, you don't get your fingers stuck between two of them, I'm telling you.
That's for sure.
It will snap them off. Any more questions?
I'm going to put a link in the chat. They have a video series, I guess it's once a week or so, where they talk about the interesting things they find in their warehouse, and probably get a kick out of some of those.
You really should watch that. It's this is our check-in guy. He's been with us for a very long time, and he has quite a sense of humor. And he does a 60-second video every week. We had no idea he had this talent, but he finds the kind of the oddest or the craziest thing that he has found during that week during checking equipment in, and he does a little quick short 60-second video. We post them every week. It's on our YouTube page. You really should watch it. It's very entertaining. I guess my favorite one, he actually he said, to prove that we are dedicated to reuse, we had somebody recycled a razor, electric razor, and he shaved his head with it in the sixth. So there's nothing that he won't do, and it's quite entertaining. You wouldn't believe the things that come through our door. I could do a whole series. You ought to look at my LinkedIn sometime. I've done a couple blogs about it. One time I recycled a safe with money in it, and yes, it had money in it. It was amazing. And somebody just recycled a safe with us and left their money in. We get cadaver tubs from medical facilities. Just, I could go on and on about. I mean, we are an electronics recycler, and so basically, if it has a plug, we can recycle it. We did a huge project for Diebold for ATMs. We had this place full for several years of voting machines. And I could go into that part of it too, because it was interesting. I'd read in the news about voter fraud and about how they hacked into one of these portable voting machines. And not 2 weeks after that, my rep called me and said, "Hey, I got a bunch of machines for you." And I got to look at it. It was the same model number, and they wanted them destroyed. And so we destroyed voting machines. We destroyed ATMs. ATMs that were in prisons that were full of sand, I found out. And that's how they make them so heavy so people can't haul them off. We had bags of sand. I mean, we've recycled all types of things. So it's quite interesting industry to be in. But our bread and butter, and what we do mostly of it, is just your basic computers, laptops. Now it's tablets and all the networking gear. UPS. I mean, we wheel racks, take racks out of data centers, crush the drives for them, the cabling. We've even removed some of the cabling, and but there's pretty much nothing that we do not accept. We accept pretty much everything electronic, except televisions. And that's something that I could do another whole presentation on, recycling TVs, but we got out of TV recycling a while back. But pretty much anything else, even the software, the cables, all the junk that's in there, we take it. I'll go on with some of these 5 things, and I think these are valuable. It is a bit of an insider's point of view. Some of my competitors may not be so wild about me saying some of this, but I do want to point out a couple things. Number 1 is, don't give your equipment away to your employees. It's not a good recycling plan. And I have witnessed this firsthand from some of my IT contacts have complained about this, that in fact, I have several interesting stories about it. And I can't tell you how many times that we've been in a facility removing equipment, and somebody from accounting walks by, or somebody that's not, usually they're not in IT, and they walk by and they see this cart of laptops that we're hauling off. Well, they see our name, Computer Crusher, so they just immediately, oh, they're going to crush all these, they're going to destroy, they're going to just throw away all this equipment. And they'll go to the IT, hey, I need a laptop, y'all get rid of those? And so even some of the businesses will, it's usually not, I can tell you this, it's usually not IT that comes up with this idea, it's upper management that says, you know what, so we can help with costs and everything, let's just give all this stuff away to our employees and they'll take care of it and it'll go away, we won't have to deal with a recycler or anything. Well, I mean, surely you can see there's several issues with that, but firsthand, I've been told by the IT guys about, they get bogged down with requests. Once Joe Smith takes it home and tries to boot up his laptop and there's no audio, or he can't get online, or there's an issue with the video, or whatever it is, he's going to call the IT guy or call him aside and say, hey, can you help me out? I just got this laptop from you guys, but I can't. And so you get bogged down with requests. The other thing is, it might find its way back on your network. And I've seen that happen. And I've heard guys complain about that the employee ends up bringing it back and plugging it into the network somewhere. The other thing, though, to consider is what will that employee do with it when they're finished with it? It may be a good short-term idea to say, hey, give it, yeah, it'll disappear, go out of our room. They take it home, well, they'll give it to their niece. How does she recycle it? If you're worried about the environmental aspect, what if she tosses it in the trash? If you didn't have your asset tag pulled, maybe your asset tag's still on there and ends up in the dump somewhere. I'll talk about that problem later. And again, I mentioned the part about just the detail that we go through in scrubbing equipment, as far as like a BIOS stamp, for lack of a better term, and different things that Joe user is not going to be able to handle if you just give it away. Number 2 is, as I mentioned earlier, look for a full service provider. And if you've dealt with IT people, then you've gone through this scenario of and I can promise you, we see this all the time. We'll go into a business and there's nothing but printers. So, or there's nothing but there's a stack of hard drives. Where's all your other equipment? Oh, somebody else took that. We just want to recycle this. So what happens is, so I'll tell you a true story. So just a couple of weeks ago, an ISD contacted us. I guess I've given ISDs a bad name, but we actually do several large ISDs, and they're very good to work with, and most of them their stuff doesn't end up on Craigslist. But this ISD reached out to us, and to make a long story short, they had an entire truckload full of printers and copiers. And that's basically it. And so our very first question is, hey, where's your PCs and laptops, and do you have any network or any other equipment to go with it? No, this was all they were left with. So this put them We didn't touch it. It was so much equipment that we did not even want to be responsible for. And this is the ugly part of recycling, is having to deal with printers. There's a cost involved. And quite frankly, I'm sure the school district cannot afford it. I don't know what they're going to do. So we passed on it. But this is what happens when you hand your stuff out to your employees. The better type of equipment, bottom line is, and I'll talk about it more in an upcoming point, but if they would have hung on that, they would have had a little bit of bargaining power to deal with what we estimated a $30,000 issue that they have right now. And I feel really bad for them, but I don't know what they're going to do. So the bottom line is, you can get in trouble by having people come and just cherry pick things out of your pile trying to recycle for you. You want them to be able to offer you on-site or off-site destruction. We already talked about that. And provide you documentation for it. Now, a lot of times, especially if you don't do it on-site, and I'm not saying you have to do it on-site, it makes the process smoother off-site. And many companies will not offer you on-site destruction because they can't do it. But you at least need to have some type of documentation. Our documentation for a certificate of destruction is serial numbers. So if I go to your place and I remove 500 hard drives and we destroy those, you'll have 500 serial numbers documented on the sheet. Now, if you don't know what those serial numbers are, you have to just trust us that these are the serial numbers from your equipment. That's up to you to know which serial numbers that you have. Some IT departments do that, some don't. But that's usually not a big problem. You need some type of documentation showing that the work was done on the date of destruction. Number 3 is what I was just alluding to, is use your equipment for bargaining power. So this is the little secret here. And you can balance the cost of recycling if there is a cost. Sometimes there's not a cost. Sometimes people will pay you for your equipment. It just depends on what you are recycling. The bottom line is, if you have a bunch of printers and copiers like this ISD ended up with, they have no bargaining power. If you have a stack of hard drives and with no units to go with them, with no PCs or laptops, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Sometimes that's the way the process works. They got doled out other places in your organization. You needed to hang on to them for a certain period of time, but there'll be a charge involved with that. But you have so much more bargaining power if you can provide equipment that goes with it. Because in our world, in this industry of recycling, we want the equipment. And so if you hang on to it, sometimes it's a better move to sell it to Craigslist laptop guy who will pay you money. He might pay you some decent money for it, but you might end up paying more on the other end as the ISD by not being able to provide that. So that's something to look forward. That's something to look at, because again, a lot of the recyclers, when they come in, we've cleaned up. I say this because we've cleaned up after them so many times. We bailed companies out where they came in and they took all the good stuff and left us with the bad. Number 4, ask your processor how they handle end-of-life equipment. So this is more on the environmental side. And if this is one of your primary concerns, you need to ask them how they handle end-of-life. I know how they handle the PC and laptop, and I'm sure there's good reuse potential for that. And that's the easy part. What do they do with the old equipment that's end of life? And some companies are more concerned about that than others. But I mentioned backyard recycling. You kind of Google that on YouTube or pull it up on YouTube. You definitely don't want to deal with some of those characters that kind of do it your DIY recycling. But I mentioned here monitors in the dumpster. Several years ago, one of our competitors, interestingly enough, set up shop right by us. It's a couple streets over. And, actually, maybe they didn't start out as a competitor, but this is another kind of a thing to look out for, is they were a metals recycler, and they got into e-waste recycling. on the side. Well, one day I had passed by there multiple times a day as I was driving home one day, I looked across their parking lot, and in their dumpster, there's CRT monitors sticking out. They're overflowing. And I couldn't resist to go in and take a picture. I never posted it, never did anything with it, but it was just amazing to me. Those things, just by the way, and you may know this, but CRT monitors have 5 to 10 pounds of lead in them, of lead. And when those get dumped in the dumpster, that's what goes in the landfill. Thankfully, and I've been through this from the early days, it's all we saw. We saw very few LCDs. Can't tell you how many tons of CRTs we processed. But thankfully, those are going away. But one more thing I'll mention here, I know it's here in my list, environmental treasure hunting. So there are some groups out there. There are some environmental watchdog groups that will they will get children as a summer camp. They offer this, and one of the activities they offer is going to the local landfill and with cameras, taking pictures of any electronics they can find with an asset tag on it. So this is where you don't want to have your equipment with an asset tag, property of Dollar General or whoever it is, sitting in a landfill, because they take pictures of it and they post it on their website. It's been a while since I looked at their site, but they refresh it and they show this. And so you might have thought you were doing the right thing. You might have done due diligence and checking out the recycler and doing some of the things I talked about. But in the end, to protect yourself, I would recommend removing those asset tags, because you deal with the wrong person, it might end up in a dumpster somewhere or in a landfill. And you don't want to become famous that way. Lastly, it's an obvious thing, but I say stay focused on security when you're thinking through this about how you're going to get rid of this equipment. And I put it out there, and it's not quite as popular with because I'll just say this: we're an environmental company, but I put security number one, and then I look at environmental issues number two. Now, I don't think environmental issues have to be compromised by security, but I think security is the very first thing you look at. And as far as our talk is, as far as what we're talking about today, that's my point, is that's the first thing that needs to come up in your mind is, how is this equipment going to be handled? You need to know who you're doing business with. I can tell you that it is difficult. There's not one of us on every corner. Over the years, I've seen a lot of them crop up. And there's literally, as I mentioned, the guys around the corner, they're gone. There's been so many of these recycling companies pop up over the years that have gone by the wayside. We have done cleanups for one of them that was a large one, and they left in the middle of the night, basically, and left a huge mess. And we made a deal with the property owner, and we cleaned it out for them. But that's exactly what they did. They cherry picked everything and left town. And luckily we were able to contact some of their customers, and that helped us out in some different ways. But there's been so many, bottom line, is fall by the wayside, that get into electronics recycling, even really big corporations, big corporate type recycling outfits that have gone away recently. There's been a really big one. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, which that would be another topic for another day. But I think it helps to look at somebody's track record and see how long they have been doing it, because you can't do the wrong thing for too long. We had a guy here locally in the Denton area that we found out about that was charging people for recycling CRT monitors, and then he would dump them at Goodwill. And they finally caught on to this and stopped him. But I guess that's better than in the dumpster that I found. But again, it just really kind of pays to know. And I put this in there more really for my notes. I put missed drives. One thing that I kind of credit ourselves for doing, and we've been doing it for so long, that it's the statement that I made earlier. No matter how many times we have done business with people, and no matter how thorough the IT department is, you're probably going to miss some drives. You can't put your finger on every single one. Depends on how big of an outfit you're with. But things fall through the cracks. They get thrown in the bottom of a box and the bottom of a printer, and it gets hauled off. If you're doing business with the right person, they will find those drives and they will destroy them for you. And you got somebody. Bottom line is you got somebody watching your back. So those are the 5 things that I just thought about. I think kind of from an insider's point of view that I think is helpful. I hope I've given you some things to think about when you're thinking about computer recycling, and I hope I've enlightened you a little bit, maybe some of the dark side of what goes on with IT recycling. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer them.
Just out of curiosity, on servers, IT guys that say they pulled the drives, but forget that they have the internal SD card. How many of you found like that?
We find quite a few. We found that the same issue with copiers, and many customers wouldn't even realize that the copiers had drives in them. So sometimes it's pretty tricky. We have to go in. It definitely helps us if the IT team can tip us off and say, hey, this is the type of equipment that we're using. This is the type of equipment that we have. And sometimes they have these drives embedded, but we go through them. We still, to this day, have we still do tear down to this day. We disassemble IT equipment by hand. And we still do that part of it. But we also have more of the equipment has shifted toward reuse. And so the worst case scenario, to answer your question, if the technician did not find it, all of our drive discovery is done when we're actually inventorying the equipment in. If it makes it to a reuse table, that's where they find additional drives that maybe the tech didn't find the first time because the equipment is booted up. If the equipment cannot be booted up, it's destroyed. So you have somebody manually taking it apart and scrapping the whole unit. So sooner or later, we have multiple checkpoints that the equipment goes through where we find drives that weren't pulled on site or by the customer.
I would imagine you probably found internal USBs since a lot of servers have those slots too.
Absolutely. And there's just, you guys have so much so many data points and storage points that it's just almost impossible to stay on top of everything. And so, that's our job too, to stay on top of technology and know, what has SSD cards in it now. And so, if you look for a big hard drive and then you find out it's got a little SSD mounted on the side of a card somewhere in the box. So there's different things to look for as trends have, over the years have changed in IT.
Okay, I'm going to ask maybe perhaps a different question. I noticed that our copiers generate some kind of film that is a version of a document that was printed or produced an impression. How much of a security risk is that film in a copier or multifunction device that's recycled or disposed of?
Well, there would probably be some risk if anytime you have a data image on anything, then there's going to be some risk. But we recycle that type of material, and that type of material gets recycled in bulk. I know I would have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the same, that material is the same type of media as floppy disk as a disc are made out of, the same type of film, and we shred that type of material. And it's gonna be different for each individual type of copier. Some copiers don't have drives at all. It's just stuff that we have to look up to see exactly how it stores data. But it's something that's a good question. That's something that you need to be aware of. It helps if you know, hey, this copier's got a drive in it or it doesn't, or it captures data on film.
So how small of a company do you guys tend to work with? I'm thinking specifically of the downtown small nonprofit, like the local Red Cross office, or something that may only have a machine every couple of years, or that sort of thing.
There's multiple options, particularly now with COVID going on. We have more companies that are bringing stuff here and dropping stuff off at our warehouse. So a lot of companies, we're located here in Denton. As I mentioned before we got started, we go down to Corpus, we go all over Texas picking stuff up. But our bread and butter is usually in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, somewhere in this area. But we have IT guys dropping stuff off a lot of smaller shops, and to me, it's a good opportunity to get out of the office if you can do that. And we have one guy, he loves it. I mean, he makes the afternoon of it. And he goes home early, I'm pretty sure. But they actually rented or bought a trailer or something, and they load the stuff up, and he brings it. Part of it, I think he wants to actually see it being done himself and see how it works, which is perfectly fine. But a lot of we do really small doctors' offices. We pick up small locations, and usually we would if it's just a couple things, we might be able to pick it up if we're in your area. We get your information and say next time we're looking at a map, next time we're in your area, we'll swing by and pick it up. But you can also Monday through Friday, you can come by our warehouse and just drop it off, and you can actually watch the hard drives being destroyed. Now, right now, of course, like everybody else, things are different. We were doing things a whole lot differently before all this thing happened. And we're asking that you unload it yourself. We have pallets there for you to unload it, but we don't like to do it that way. We like to be full service and do everything, but just kind of because of COVID, that's what we're doing now. But you can literally pull up to our warehouse and offload stuff. If you need drives destroyed, you could watch that process as well.
What we would do, Lauren, when I worked at the manufacturing company a few years ago, is we'd just keep a decent sized trash bin, like you might set out for residential trash or recycling, close by the server room, and put all the junk from the manufacturing plants that came back and didn't work. And once it was full, I'd just call Brad, say, hey, it's time to pick this up. And he'd swing by when they were in the area.
I love the trash can. That made it so easy. Wheels, and of course, it's heavy as it could. You'd wait, Nick would wait till it was full and the top was busting up a little bit, but it's quite heavy. But it made it easy. You just wheel it out to the truck. We, for bigger shops, or you don't necessarily have to be a big shop, but we provide boxes. And if you have room to stick a pallet under it, that's even better. But it organizes your IT shop, and I've really helped a couple of companies with that because of what I faced when I walked in the door. And it's kind of one of those pictures I had here earlier of just you walk in the door and you see this mountain of stuff. But we can actually put those big movers boxes. They're triple wall. They're very heavy, but you can set those. You can even put a little small dolly under it and use that to put all your stuff in. Then when it's full, you just call us and we wheel it out. You don't even have to put those on a pallet again. You put a little movers dolly and we can supply all that. But if you have somewhere to do that in your IT room, I did this for a big engineering firm, and they went through a ton of stuff, but it really transformed them because I go in there. It's usually somebody's cubicle that's full, and they can't even work in there. There's stuff all around them. But once we set the boxes up, they got in a process of putting it in there. Then it's easy to know when to call us because they kind of gauge it and say, okay, yeah, they're full, and we just come take care of it. Some shops will pull the drives. They want to do it themselves. Some are too busy, and some have done business with us long enough. They trust us and they know us. They leave everything as is, and we're 100%. We do all their security for them, and we pull the drives, crush them. People do it different ways.
So when you repurpose them, do you only do the repurpose where you can see the COA sticker on it, or how do you do the Windows licensing when you do a repurpose?
I'm not real familiar with that. I know I'm going to say that we purchased licenses for them, but I know it changed with Windows 10, and I apologize, I'm just not the best person to talk about that. That's a whole nother, I'm sitting in their building now, but it's a whole nother department. But they, for a while, we were purchasing them, and I assume that's what they're doing with Windows 10, but I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. But I know that everything is authenticated that we repurpose, and it's authenticated through Microsoft before it goes out of our door. I know I can say that for sure.
Is there any warranty provided on those, Brad, that you know of? Like if you're refurbishing something and reselling it, do you provide a hardware warranty, or is it just kind of as is?
We provide a warranty. I want to say it's 30 days for the average person that comes in. We can do longer for some if we do bulk systems.
Sure.
I want to say, and this has been a great resource. Khan Academy, I believe, purchased a large number of machines from us. Since the pandemic started, we have a lot of companies buying equipment from us to work from home, and it's been a great resource for them. And so I meant to mention this earlier, but I can say that I've seen the shift in this business. Where I showed you those beige PCs at the very beginning of the presentation. 80% of what I would guess, 80% of what I brought in to the warehouse was end of life. Maybe 20% was reuse. Now, I promise you it's 90% is reuse and 10% is end of life. Maybe 20%. But we have a lot, it has just flip-flopped, and a large volume comes in here with reuse. There are organizations that can use it. One thing we were a blessing to another ISD story, but my kids were attending there, and I saw the IT department was sending out notification that they were short on equipment. They were struggling to get, right when all this broke and everybody was going to have to do Zoom meetings from home for school, the kids, they needed Chromebooks. We had 100 Chromebooks sitting in our warehouse that we donated to them. And we were only able to do that because of what we do. And so every one of those 100 Chromebooks that we donated, we had to go in and power wash every one of those. And again, you guys know more about that probably than I do, but we do spend the time to go through them and wipe them clean as we do all of our equipment. And it was it just really bailed them out of a tough situation, being able to do that. But there is such a market now for reuse, and which is a wonderful thing because it's so much better than actually having to tear everything down and recycle everything. And it benefits a lot of people. But yeah, back to that was a long probably response to your question, but yeah, usually on warranties, we go through them fully and refurbish them, and they test all the components. We have more and more customers that will allow us to wipe their drives. We do a DoD wipe. We invested in a system that's very thorough, and it goes in and wipes drives so that we can reload OSs on them.
Thank you. That actually answered one of my other questions.
Yes, that's something that's come about the last several years. Again, we have always been a physical destruction, and we still do lots of physical destruction. I've got customers out there, and they don't care about reuse or recycling, or They want their hard drive crushed, and that's why we're here. And they want it. Some of them want it done on site, but we still do physical drive destruction. But more and more people are open to the idea of reuse and the benefit that it is to the environment.
It is the second R in reduce, reuse, recycle.
Absolutely. And it really does make a lot of sense. Our business here is powered off of reuse. We don't buy equipment. We did have to give in and buy a couple network pieces here a while back, but we refurbish all the equipment that we use here in office. And I'm just amazed at how long we can just keep going with it. I mean, it just keeps, we don't really have issues. Of course, we do have a bit of advantage. We have lots of parts in case something goes wrong, but it's worked out well for us.
Brad, how granular do you get? Do you go as far as stripping insulation off of cables and melting down and separating precious metals?
No, we definitely don't do that. We use local recyclers for our metal processing. That's a whole nother world. Once you get into smelting, and again, if you can go on YouTube and watch backyard recycling. Some of those guys try it in their backyard, but the EPA gets involved, and we don't want anything to do with that. But we've been doing this a long time. Sorting is a huge part of what we do. And my teardown guys, I'm in awe of them, how they distinguish circuit boards. But we have, I'm going to say, approximately 11 different types of circuit boards. And they can look at chip population and know which box those go into when they're tearing down equipment. It's the same with the, like you mentioned, the wiring and the cabling. That's all done by gauge. But it's tricky because some of it is thick gauge, but it's all plastic and very little copper. So they know which has more copper and less insulation, but all of that gets sorted into like animals. And then once we sort everything, I meant to throw a couple pictures up on my presentation that showed just boxes. But you can see it on our probably YouTube as well. But you'll see just boxes of all different, one type of cable, all one type of circuit boards. And all those like animals go together, and then we just take them to local processors.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Do you have companies that say that, they kind of use you as a resource for their loaner pool, and they just kind of, cycle through that, and when it dies, and they just ask you for more? Or is that really not, I guess I don't know of a lot of the age of some of that equipment. Is that really worthwhile to think about?
Are you saying does other recycling companies come to us?
No, actual companies. Like if my company wanted to come to you to say, we want to keep, 20 loaners in stock. And, whenever we get down to like 5, we
Gotcha. Yeah.
So is it worth, is the average performance really kind of too low for a business loaner, or would it still work? Because, when this whole COVID started, we were just like any other company. We had a hard time finding equipment. So, if we would have leveraged maybe you guys, we could have got some, loaners in and, done it that way.
Absolutely. Like I say, we've experienced it ourselves. Again, we use the very same equipment that we refurbish. And we've been bombarded by businesses buying equipment. This is what's happened with the COVID issue, and a lot of companies are scrambling. And absolutely, we have several customers that regularly, they just give us the specs and say, this is what we got to have. It's got to have this OS on it, or some of them don't want an OS loaded. Some of them don't want to drive in it. They say, we'll put the drives, but we need these specs, and I need 20 machines that have these specs. And yes, absolutely. That's exactly what we do. Another part of it is, and I did I did a video, I guess it was a blog, or maybe it was a video it should be on our YouTube page. But one thing that has surprised me over the years is the quality of equipment we get. And I think when people think about a computer recycling company, especially with our name's kind of hurt us a little bit over the years, is Computer Crusher. They have this image of what we do to computers. But we go to businesses that have overbought inventory, that write it off and say, here, you recycle this. We don't have a plan for it. We're not going to sell it to our employees. We don't run an eBay store here. So you take this equipment. We get, unfortunately, and I'm afraid we're going to start running into this now, of companies closing and reducing staff. And so here's a bunch of machines that staff is no longer using. It's not necessarily the fact that it comes in our warehouse because it's done and it's just extremely old. We get stuff new in the box. There's just a lot of large companies that will overbuy stuff and then they're just left with it and they just mark it off inventory and move on. I'm not saying all our stuff is brand new, but that does happen. And we do get really nice equipment. And I have not come across that being an issue whatsoever as far as some of our refurbishing units go. The group that we have now running that is very good, and they're very customer service oriented and very techy, a lot more than me. And I probably should have had at least one of them here to answer some of the questions, but yes, they go through them and fully refurbish, and I think they'd be great units sitting on the side. You know, we had one company the other day bought 300 keyboards from us, and we had 300 keyboards new in the box. Well, that was just from a large company that said, we don't need keyboards anymore. We get monitor stands. Well, you guys probably have them in your closets and everything, but I guess, you know, a lot of IT companies a lot of companies won't use the stands. They'll just mount the LCD on something else or whatever. For whatever reason, they don't use the LCD stand. And we'll get tons of brand new, you know, monitor stands, keyboards, mice, just stuff that they simply don't need. And it's been great, as in the story of those Chromebooks. It's been great we get a thrill out of finding a home for them, a good place for them, rather than, you know, having to go down the recycling route.
Okay, since you're in the know on computer recycling, is it good advice to suggest that consumers, just regular people, not businesses, take their electronic recycling to Goodwill? Or is there another better, more recommended strategy?
We would like you to bring it to us, but from what I can't really speak for Goodwill's program, for exactly what they do. But I'm sure, you know, Goodwill is not going to be a recycler. They have somebody that I'm sure recycles for them. And so I'm sure they benefit from that, from nice equipment. Of course, I can't speak intelligently about Goodwill and who refurbishes equipment for them and how they go about their process. But we do the same thing. I mean, we benefit several different organizations. We're able to do stuff like the Chromebooks because we take donations from other people, because people donate, you know, good working equipment to us. But that's what also funds, particularly a recycling company. That's how they recycle the printers and the ugly stuff. And there's a lot of things that cost money to recycle if it's done properly. And so that's what helps fund us being here. And I take a lot of pride, you know, and I look at that stat we posted earlier about 422,000 pounds that we responsibly recycled. And we're able to recycle the bad along with the good. So, yeah, I think as far as answering your question about Goodwill, I think that's a good program. but I can't speak directly on how they handle it. We do the same thing here. We have just residential drop-offs. As I mentioned, you can bring your stuff out here to our warehouse, but we have residents coming all the time. Monday through Friday, they just come and drop stuff off at our warehouse. We do cleanouts for business for city of Corpus. I actually do one for the city of Corpus. It's a very large event, and people are lined up blocking traffic all day long coming in and out as we recycle their equipment, and while they're doing a shredding event right next to us. So we do that for a lot of trying to think, Providence, some of these smaller communities that we do recycling events twice a year. We go to some businesses. We go to large businesses and for Earth Day, we'll go out and do a recycling event for them as well. So we take it from residents and as well as commercial. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you. So I could just bring my stack of hard drives up to you just if I'm in the neighborhood, and you would take them, or how would I need to pay for that service, or what?
So normally, if you're just to walk up if you're just to walk up, no, but if you show up to recycle, there is a charge for drives. I want to say currently it's $3 per drive. Honestly, I think right now during COVID that you can just bring it and we'll crush it and there's no charges. We are just trying to offer the contactless and safest way to go about processing other people's equipment. And so if you came today, then it'd probably be to your advantage because you could probably get it done at no charge. But normally speaking, if things ever get back to some type of normal, we normally charge for that process like $3 a drive for you to sit there and watch it being done, physically destroyed. Well, like I say, we have a lot of IT guys, a lot of IT shops stop by, and sometimes it's a lot of stuff. They just, again, they want to get out of the house, so to speak, get out of the office and just drop it off. We have forklifts and normally staff here to unload it, but again, kind of different right now with COVID.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.